More on this now with the former Chief Scientific Advisor to the government, Sir David King, who joins me now. Sir David, good morning to you. A significant day yesterday. The Prime Minister announcing a further easing of lockdown, perhaps going further than many had expected. Was he right?
I think it's extraordinarily risky. If we take the long view, we know that the winter is a likely period when the virus takes off again. We must therefore aim to completely get rid of the virus from this country before the winter. And if we move too quickly, which is what I think is being proposed here, the risk of running into a second wave becomes very significant. We have done such a good job in this country, we, the public, in staying at home. If we could only be a little more patient, we still see 1,000 at least new cases a day in this country. And I don't think there's anyone who can believe from the scientific point of view that this is a wise move. We really need to get the number of infections down, and we must have a find, test, trace, isolate and support system. A find system means you find every new case. A test system means you test every new case with the virus. And isolate, every one of these must be properly isolated for 2 weeks. Now, that must be checked on. And secondly, those who put into isolation must be supported. That system isn't fully up and running yet. The system introduced by the government, and I believe was extremely clumsy. My group believes we should have been using local authorities, GPs, etc., to implement all of that. Why not use that even now? I would encourage the government to spread the use of capability in existing localities. But until we have all of that fully operating, this is extremely risky. It's like traveling in the dark. We don't know where the virus is spreading until it's too late, and we don't stop it spreading. But
the government has got to weigh up the economic implications as well. We've had one of the longest lockdowns. The infection rate is shrinking at between 2 and 4% each day. The R number is below 1. How long can you really feasibly expect people to stay at home, to stay away from work, businesses to be closed, without causing even greater damage?
In terms of the development of this epidemic, we went into lockdown much later than every other country, except 1 or 2 where the virus is taking off very crudely right now. The reason it's taking us longer to come out of lockdown is simply because we had a much greater infectivity rate in the population. And if we follow Germany and Spain and Italy in coming out of lockdown too quickly, because we see them coming out of lockdown, we will see, or we risk severely seeing another wave. If I just take, for example, Spain, they came out of lockdown when there were no deaths per day for 7 days in a row. Now, that's really a good measure of when you're getting it under control. We are still seeing a large number of weekly deaths in this country. And I'm afraid the signs are that the infectivity rate in the country may already even be going up. So I think there is a real problem, and I fully understand. But from an economic point of view as well, we need to get this pandemic over with as quickly as possible. The last thing to do is to risk losing that. Now, of course,
I'm interested. Sorry, Sir David, I'm conscious that we are a bit short of time and I do want to get through a lot with you. I'm interested in your perspective as a former Chief Scientific Advisor. Looking at that news conference yesterday, the Prime Minister standing there alongside Patrick Vallance and Chris Whitty, the body language between them. How comfortable do you think the scientific advisors were with the moves announced yesterday, and what will have been going on behind the scenes?
I don't believe there's any difference of opinion on this issue between independent SAGE that I'm currently chairing and the SAGE group. The SAGE scientists are themselves signing.
So do you think the Prime Minister went against the will of his scientists?
I think this is definitely a political decision. And of course, in the end, the scientists are there to give advice and political decisions are made. But let me stress again, the economics point in exactly the same way. It's not as if the economists should be saying, come on, guys, stop the lockdown, let's get back to business, without knowing that we can get this under control. Everyone must see that the sooner we get it under control, the sooner we get the economy back up and running, the sooner we get schools, offices, shops, restaurants, pubs, etc. open. But I tell you what I'm really worried about, and this is what every scientist is worried about. Around the whole world, 97% of what's called super spreading events occur indoors. And if we're saying we're going to open up restaurants and in particular pubs, I think that's where the big risk lies. Because we all know two things. One is the pubs do get quite crowded. Now, they will try to keep to even the 1 meter rule. But as the evening goes on and people get happier and merrier, we all know what happens. We all relax. And 1 meter apart is roughly the distance, the social distance average that we stand up between each other. But when we're talking, we use body language. And when we use body language, we narrow that distance down.
There were very firm warnings, though, weren't there, from the Prime Minister and the scientific advisors yesterday that we really do need to stick to the guidance. It is 2 metres wherever possible, 1 metre plus with mitigations. Can I ask you about the different approaches, though, between the different nations of the United Kingdom? They're all seeing the same science. The Chief Medical Officer said that he was in constant contact with the chief medical officers of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. So why are we seeing these different approaches?
Quite simply different political decisions, I'm sure. I don't think that there's a disagreement across the borders about the science and how risky it is to change the strategy at this point in time. I mean, one thing I can say is that the Prime Minister made very clear statements about the fact that the government is going to keep an eye on whether or not this results in a super spread event. I need to worry, though, about the statement about localities. In other words, if we say, right, in Liverpool there's a super spread event, therefore Liverpool goes back into lockdown, I'm afraid it's difficult to understand a local spread event in a country where movement of people around the country is happening. In other words, it's likely that if it begins locally in one part of the country, it will spread.
OK. Sir David King, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this morning.
Thank you.